Michael sir, shall we begin?
Yeah.
Shall we begin?
Yeah, Rachel.
Sir, may I request all of you to keep your mics on mute? എല്ലാവരോടും മൈക്ക് മ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ ആവശ്യപ്പെട്ടു സർ. കാർത്തികേയൻ സർ, തുടങ്ങാം നമുക്ക്. തുടങ്ങാം സാറേ.
തുടങ്ങാം. വെൽക്കം പറഞ്ഞോട്ടെ.
ശരി സർ.
Dear friends, we are entering on our webinar program today, and it is rainy in Trivandrum. Heavy rain. We experienced a heavy rain morning, and now it is drizzling. And it is expected that the state will experience heavy rainfall for the next few days. That is a weather forecast. Anyway, you are all welcome to the KCHR webinar program. And today, it is Dr. Amit Parameswaran who is presenting the paper on historicizing theatricality, the tragic tone of beyond Thanadu Nadagavedi. That is a paper on drama. At the outset, I would like to inform you that a happy news we are going to announce that in consultation with our chairman and some of our EC members, we have decided to start a public lecture program on Kerala history, aiming at the higher secondary and college students in particular, and the Kerala public in general. It is in tune with our objectives enshrined in the Memorandum of Association of the KCHR, that we should popularize history and historical, initiate interest in historical research, historical study, etc. And we will be starting the program week after next. As announced earlier, on 6th, we have another webinar meeting on Indian citizenship, the problem concerned with the Indian citizenship and the constitutional replication on this issue. That is scheduled to be held on 6th August. And week after next, before 15th of August, we will start the first lecture on Kerala history. And it is mainly for the medium of speech will be Malayalam, because we are aiming at the Malayali population, especially the higher secondary college students doing their studies in the Kerala schools and colleges and universities alike. And it will be more refreshing for the teachers as well, because as the Kerala, the syllabi and curricula of the Kerala university, the universities in Kerala and the higher secondary course demands fresh initiatives and research into the problems. So before 15th of August, we will be starting that program, public lecture on Kerala history. See, that's a series of lectures. Perhaps it may be once in a week, or sometimes it is twice in a week, that we will decide later in consultation with the EC members and our beloved chairman. And now it is my duty to invite you all to this webinar, and in particular, Dr. Amit Parameswaran, who is presenting the paper Historicizing Theatricality, the Tragic Tone Beyond Thanadu Nadagavedi. I welcome Dr. Amit Parameswaran, and especially all our chairman and all the participants. Thank you, and I request our chairman, Dr. Michael Tharagan, to have his presidential address, or say a few words in the form of a presidential address. Thank you. Sir, please unmute your mic.
Hello.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, again.
Okay. Dr. Amit Parameswaran, Professor Karthikeyan Nair, Dr. Rachel Verghese, and friends. I'm happy to be here participating in this important webinar that the KCHR is organizing. I would like to remind you that, all institutions creates their own precedents. Some or most precedents become practices. I, being the chairman of this webinar, is the result of such a practice. In other words, I need not be the fittest person to chair such a presentation. Dr. Amit Parameswaran is going to talk about a subject which is not easily comprehensible to me, partly because of my unfamiliarity with the terminology, concepts, and even methodology that is likely to be used. The fault is entirely mine because I have not familiarized myself with the nuances and complexities inherent in discovering or and discussing a subject like theatricality. I have even difficulty in pronouncing it, theatricality. Nevertheless, the part that I'm familiar with is so interesting and full of further potentialities for newer kind of interpretations. As a person who has lived through the period of the Tanada Nadaga Vedi around 1980 and has participated in some of their theatrical performances. I'm extremely excited to hear a scholar analyzing a phenomenon in the overall context of the politics of the region, particularly when he pivots or centers it around the so-called accepted framing of post-colonial resistance. He is certainly will be providing alternatives, like I'm quoting from his own words, thinking through the historical valence of theatricality. Now, quote saying, KCHR is happy and proud to have had this opportunity to host such a presentation by an established young scholar in the subject. He has proved his worth. Dr. Parameswaran has proved his worth through publications in standard journals and with several awards and recognitions. Welcome everybody, particularly Amit Parameswaran, to this presentation on historicizing theatricality. I keep on mispronouncing it. The tragic dawn beyond Tanada Nadaga Vedi. Dr. Amit Parameswaran.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm really grateful to be here in the platform provided by KCHR, especially because we are looking at history, And really, big thank you for Professor Karthikeyan Nair, Professor Michael Farragut, Dr. Rachel Evergase, and KCHR for asking me to do this. And I hope, even though at the start some of you might feel theatricality is slightly things that we might not necessarily be discussing or thinking about, I hope by the end of the presentation of this working paper, we all might be able to contribute and discuss at length about these concepts and about certain histories of historical moments of Kerala. And it's sort of, therefore, very, again, grateful to be here. And as I said, this is a working paper, so I have covered certain kind of areas and tried to look at certain kind of questions that a platform like KCHR is also might be, a lot of people who are working there are also very interested in questions of, certain kind of questions of historical methodology. And that's what I've sort of concentrated on. And it is, as I said, it's a working paper and I'm kind of continuously working, and a lot of other aspects of the movement, of ways in which you can historically look at Kannada Nadagavedi has to be explored further. So with this very short kind of context, I will start and the paper itself. The term theatricality, and let's start from there, in the last couple of decades have become one of the most important and significant concepts in theater and performance studies. And the term build on theatricality is a term that is quite recent in a certain sense. It's been existence in English only from early 19th century. And yet, as a concept which Evrenov had given, the Russian director who had kind of coined the term, has become a very critical concept used in very different ways and subjected to and foregrounds things that have been so broad, so diverging, that it is not easy, it's not a term that is easy to pin down with a precise definition. And yet, I kind of therefore invoke certain kinds of definitions which have been given, which I think is very useful to kind of start thinking about the questions of what theatricality gives us, brings forward to us. Now, one of the most rigorous and very interesting conceptual theorization was given by the theater scholar, philosopher, Joseph Ferral, who theorized it following a Kantian framework, where she kind of argued that theatricality is a tacit concept. And what she did, and I will just explain for people who might not be familiar, very simple, and it started with a very simple ways of proposition to kind of ask theater, if there is an essence of theater, or is there something specific about theater? Is theatricality, is that specificity of theater? Is it a property that is specific to theater? And that's kind of a starting point to think about then what might be the specificity of theater? Is theatricality the specificity of theater? And she kind of starts and gives us three scenarios, which are very simple scenarios on one hand, but very interesting to think through the problem of theatricality. And she says the first scenario is a very simple one again. You go into a proscenium theater and you go and sit there in the theater and there's a play that is going to start, but it is not started yet, but the lights are there, lights are dimmed, there are some stage lights on the stage, etc. And you say that the play has not, or the performance has not actually started. And yet sitting there in the theater, you could feel that there is something at play, that there is going to be theater, there is already theatricality at play. And so that's the first instance that she gives, which is almost like you feel you go to a theater and see this. The second instance is where she says, you know, you're traveling in a train, a metro, and then suddenly in the midst of the metro, while the metro is going on, somebody is smoking a cigarette. And another person starts objecting, said you cannot smoke a cigarette. And they kind of get into an argument, they keep arguing about smoking, etc. And that person, the other person kind of shows, there's a small label in the metro train saying no smoking. So he shows that, you know, there is a rule. So he said, no, there is no rule. And all of that, they kind of keep arguing about it. And once the metro reaches in the station and it opens out, and they both kind of walk out together with them showing a board of a big, huge billboard campaigning or advertising for cigarettes. Now, she says this is a very interesting context. This is more like what Augusto Boal would call invisible theater, that there is almost a theater in daily life which you realize is theater post facto. That once they kind of walk out, you realize they were actually actors trying to raise an issue about, say, smoking, where there's huge corporate or advertisements about smoking there, and a small no smoking sign. So this, she takes it an example, and Augusto Boal does a lot of such interventions, or theorized also a lot of such interventions in the real life, that you create a certain kind of trouble, certain arguments and context in the real life, which later then you suddenly realize it is actors who are doing it, and suddenly you start reframing your whole journey in the metro within the frame of a theatricality. It's post facto. And the third example, which is even more an extreme example for her, and that's where the Kantian problem becomes very strong, in the sense that she says that it also could be simply a gaze that you put as a person to the reality, everyday mundane reality, to kind of say, almost you put a frame on it, to kind of say that it's as if the real life seems like theater. People are behaving as if in a choreography, a peculiar, you look at a street from out there, from your window, you see everything, but you put a frame, which is a theatricality. A frame of theatricality, suddenly something else is kind of visible in the everyday mundane life. Now, these three scenarios, which seems to be very simple, but which allows you to see something else for Feral, that she would say, working through three differing scenarios, ranging from what I said, a situation where theater has not yet begun, to incidents in the mundane that seems to activate theatricality, or allowing in some way a fiction and virtual space of the other to emerge. So Feral links theatricality, therefore, to a cleft in the mundane, that there is a cleft in the mundane, and within that mundane, another emerges. And that's what the theatricality does. So in a certain sense, more than a property with analyzable characteristics, for Feral, theatricality seems to be a process that has to do with a gaze that postulates and creates a distinct virtual space belonging to the other, from which a fiction can emerge. Now, this alterity and the cleft in the mundane can be effected either, like we saw, either through an intention of an actor or that of a spectator. While not restricted to stage, theater becomes for Feral the art that may be best suited to experimentation with such fiction and representation of other. So that her main primary argument is that theatricality is not necessarily restricted to theater, but it becomes, theater is an art that is best suited for experimentation of theatricality. Therefore, the problem and the conceptual definition of theatricality, therefore, as transcendental and indeed universal, and parameters shared by all theatrical enterprises from time immemorial. Now, this is a position. And this is something that I take as a starting point, which also I interrogate through the paper. For theatricality is simultaneously a discourse with differing genealogies, and rather than simply being a concept revealing the object of theatricality, it is caught in histories of contestations, varied practices and imaginations, as well as ascriptions of value. Theater scholar Janelle Reinelt, for example, kind of thinks through this and thinks through the genealogies of the terms performativity, which is much more familiar probably for people, and theatricality, and their contestations, and highlights the preference of performativity by the Anglo-American Academy as compared to theatricality within the European Academy. Reading through these complex genealogies, Reinelt argues for a negotiation between the concepts wherein the identification of certain of these applications with specific nations or regions, what we might call local struggles, enables a challenge to limit these discourses in the light of an increasingly urgent imperative to rethink and resituate performance theory in relation to a contemporary transnational situation, unquote. So rather than neat partitions or assumptions of superiority of conceptual strength of either theatricality or performativity, Janelle Reinelt foregrounds the need to think the possibility of the emergence of a new. Reinelt argues that one could think of how, quote, performance makes visible the micro processes of iteration and the non-commensurability of repetition in the context of historically sedimented and yet contingent practices, in order that we might stage theatricality and render palpable possibilities for unanticipated significations. Davis and Postlethwaite similarly lay down the complexity in the conceptualization and discourse of theatricality. They rightly highlight how the term has been seen in larger relation to a range of other ideas and terms such as ritual, religion, mimesis, theatrum mundi, performance, and performativity, as well as an antonym of anti-theatricalism. Historically, situating the concept, they argue that one cannot, quote, stipulate a single regulative meaning for theatricality. So resisting an over-expansive usage of the term that results in erasing differences between varied terms and ideas, they argue that the objective of historical analysis is also to, quote, clarify possible meanings and to account for how and why it resonates with a series of related but distinct terms and ideas, from mimesis and theatrum mundi to meta-theater and performativity. The present paper draws from these perspectives to historically locate theatricality both as an object and discourse in India in the period from 1960s to 80s. One central tendency in the theatre historiography in India posits an overarching post-colonial impulse driving the practices of the period, whereby theatre practices are seen as using ritual, traditional forms to resist colonialism and the hegemonic practices of Western theatre, especially naturalism and realism. This historiographical position has become almost a foundational problematic in understanding post-independence theatre in India, especially in the frame of a range of practices brought under nomenclature of Theatre of the Roots or Thanadu Nadagavedi in Malayalam. The ideological framing of them as authentic return to the roots and the reigniting of the traditions of Natya Shastra has been thoroughly critiqued, like scholars like Rustam Bharucha, who have been continuously writing about those in the period. Yet, the sheer diversity and complexity of the theatrical practices of the directors in varied regions in India has fashioned the reformulation of their practices as quote-unquote post-colonial resistance located within a homogenizing national culture in the scholarly literature. At the heart of these new interpretations is the assumption about theatricality of both modern theatre practices as well as what is categorized as indigenous or traditional practices, and it necessitates an investigation into the relationship between posited between theatricality and related ideas of ritual, epic, and performativity. Unpacking these positions about theatricality, or sometimes precisely the absence of it, such as in the frame such as of ritual, or the force of what Janelle Reinelt highlights as the micro-processes of iteration in performativity, will reveal the limits and power of the discourse and imagination of resistance. I specifically investigate the discourses around theatre practices of significant playwright director from the South Indian state of Kerala, K.N. Panikkar, around whom now there is a considerable amount of academic focus, both in vernacular Malayalam language as well as in English. While Malayalam language does not have a specific, and this I want to just clarify that actually Malayalam language does not necessarily have a specific term that is easily translatable as theatricality, I examine how it is being conceptualized even without a specific nomenclature. And I'll look at the paper in 3 sections. The first section will look at the historiographical framing of Panikkar's practice as post-colonial resistance within a national framework and problematizing their claims about a certain kind of theatrical community. In the second section, then I explore critical debates on theatricality in the region, in the vernacular, encapsulated by the theatre discussions led by the poet critic Ayyappa Panikkar around the early Malayalam productions of Panikkar. And I read these quote-unquote sympathetic discussions, and I'll come to the context of those discussions later, as offering a grounded example of spectatorship to what is perceived as an emerging new form, as well as setting up discourse on theatricality. And the last short section of the paper ends with an exploration of the critical essay by Malayalam novelist, critic, historian, and public intellectual P.K. Balakrishnan on Srikanthan Nayar's trilogy of Ramayana plays, and conceptualizing them as a site of understanding a new sonic theatricality. So I move to the first section, where the question is about theatricality and what is being framed as post-colonial resistance in the existing scholarly literature. K.N. Panikkar, the playwright, director, poet, song lyricist from Kerala, has directed 9 Sanskrit productions, authored over 20 original Malayalam plays, and has directed most of them. Panikkar rose to prominence at the national level with the Sanskrit productions, especially those written by Bhasa, starting with the Madhyama Vyayoga performed at the Kalidasa festival at Ujjain in 1978. The productions draw upon training and movement patterns from Kalaripayattu, martial art form from Kerala, aspects of acting and movements from movements from the classical dance theatre such as Kathakali, Mohiniyattam, and Kudiyattam, as well as a regional ritual performance tradition, healing performance tradition of Theyyam, with the music derived from the Kerala temple music tradition of Sopanam. The congruence of these diverse elements offers a complex theatrical experience that became the signature style of his productions. Aparna Dhadwalkar argues that in Panikar's aesthetic, the relation between text and performance is reconceived as Panikkar uses, and I quote, the text as an occasion to explore the full range of possibilities of the quote-unquote non-textual staging and communicates philosophical meanings through physical devices of enactment, thus both elaborating and reinterpreting the original. And this question of signature is also very interesting, that unlike a lot of other, most playwrights in India, Panikar's plays are seldom done by, very rarely done outside Kerala by other directors, or sometimes even very rarely even done by other directors from Kerala. So it's unlike other playwrights, it's a peculiar kind of signature aesthetic that is sort of Sopanam, which is the highlight of Panikar's works. Theatre scholar Brian Singleton, in his analysis of Panikar's performance, Theyya Theyyam, which was done in 1991, frames it as resisting both interculturalism as well as colonialism. And predictably, he draws from Sadian critique of Orientalism and takes forward A.J. Gunawardhana's critique of how rational view of the world espoused by the colonial discourse posited that in Asia, and I quote, many of the received ways of thinking and behaving depend on non-rational, that is magical, superstitious, religious beliefs, and therefore are deemed as obstacles to economic and social progress. As opposed to such economic pressures that urges rationality, Brian Singleton foregrounds that intracultural practices takes on an added political significance in that it is giving currency to inherited culture and both an allegorical and vital place in the post-colonial world. With this frame, Singleton contextualizes the practices of Sopanam as going back to, and I quote, its traditional roots in search for a way forward for modern Indian theatre, which since independence has separated itself from its origins in performance terms. And he concludes, operating as a non-exploitative bridge between past and the present, between rich indigenous traditions and modern urban world of creative arts, Sopanam allows the possibility for Panikar's actors to exploit their form and practices for new creative expression. The mainstay of Singleton's analysis is the ritual healing practice of Theyyam at the heart of the play Theyya Theyyam. Starting from the play Devatar in 1973, Panikar uses the figuration of Theyyam, the ritual healing performance from North Kerala, in many of his plays. Theyyam, linked to the sacred groves in North Kerala, generally performed by low-caste male members, and the performer, who is otherwise regarded as polluted, gets possessed by the god, performs for a wider heterogeneous communities of the region. And in most cases, Theyyam is someone, both lower caste and upper caste figure, who has been unjustly killed and then deified. In the historical study of Theyyam, Dilip Menon, for instance, drawing on Bakhtinian theorization of carnivalists, highlights how Theyyam creates a moral community. Analyzing the colonial period and transformation in the economic structures of North Malabar and caste equations, Menon foregrounds the ambivalences in the stories of different popular Theyyams and the way it brings together different hierarchical communities in the same space. Through the analysis of Theyyam stories, Menon shows that, quote, they contain implicit as well as explicit regulations on behavior, a sense of right and wrong, of justice and injustice, of morality and immorality, and terming it as a moral community of caste built around the notion of limits to the actions of both upper and lower caste. Now, what does Panikar do with this? In his Urubhangam, which is a Bhasa text, and which he does Sanskrit play in 1987, Panikar adds to the original text a Theyyam figuration, performed by an actor on stilts who silently follows the main character. Duryodhana, the anti-hero of the epic, and this Theyyam figuration follows Duryodhana, which was the anti-hero. As Dharwadkar argues, without adding any new lines to the original Sanskrit text, this critical addition reinterprets the original as, by the end of the performance, when Duryodhana dies, through the figure of the Theyyam, Duryodhana or Dur, evil becomes Suyodhana. While these usages of Theyyam in the mise-en-scène allow symbolic interpretations, in his Malayalam plays, including Theyya Theyyam, Panikkar many a times interrogate the concrete site of a Theyyam performance, its belief structure, mythic and quote-unquote real temporalities and transgressions. The narrative of Theyyam is complexly layered as it works at two levels. At the first level is the trope of localization of Ramayana as a Theyyam performance, wherein Rama, Lakshmana and Sita, Hanuman transforms into Devatar, Angakaran, Pungani and Bepuran, and Ravana is transformed into Parangi. Parangi Ravana is the haughty pirate from Portugal, traveling around the world in his sailing ship, possessing a belt tied to his waist that gives him immense power, and who murdered has become a Theyyam. Parangi as a figuration indexes the history of colonization in the region with the arrival of India and of the first European by the sea, Vasco da Gama from Portugal, in port of Kapad in 1498. At this level, the problem of sovereignty is problematized with the haughty pirate colonizer usurping power against what is deemed to be the sovereign or god, who on the other hand in the play does not seem to have any semblance of power and is neither belonging per se to the region. Having defeated the general population devoted to Devatar and Angakaran with outright physical strength and magical powers, Parangi, who has taken a liking to Pungani, kidnaps her and goes away. This first level of narrative of transgression of Parangi is interrupted as police enters the stage to tell the villagers that, quote unquote, this issue of story of Ramayana which took place in ancient times be set aside. Even if there is a mistake in retelling, there is nothing to worry. For there is something more pressing at the level of the real in the present. Ramunni, the performer from the lower caste community, who is to perform Parangi Theyyam, has committed the murder of the landlord, Mekandala, who tried to assault his lover, Kannipu. After the murder, Ramunni has eloped with Kannipu. The two levels get theatrically folded onto each other in complex ways, as one person plays both the role of Parangi and Ramunni, another doubles for Pungani and Kannipu, all selected by the chorus from the group of actors at various points of the performance. Kannipu's father, Sadguni, and police intervenes in the first level in their search for Kannipu. The performance keeps shifting between and at times even merges the two levels. In the mythical one, the dejected Rama and Lakshmana start searching for Sita. Rama is caught in melancholy, unable to do anything, and unlike in the mainstream Ramayana, Bepuran, which is the Hanuman figuration, after stealing the belt while the Parangi is asleep, kills Parangi to bring back Sita. In his death, Parangi emerges as a Theyyam. At the level of Ramunni's stories, on the other hand, he makes the ethical choice of coming back and embodying Parangi Theyyam for the community so that bad times do not fall on the village due to the non-performance of the ritual performance. But as he comes to the space of performance, he is murdered by the crowd or a community who has come to watch the performance for his transgression of falling in love and eloping and transgressing the caste barriers. So Theyyam of a Theyyam, hence the title and condition of Theyyam. Now Singleton in his analysis of the production highlights Panikkar's critique of naturalist and realist techniques. Highlighting Panikkar's notion that contemporary period is seeing, quote unquote, a corruption of folk forms as they have moved away from Natya Dharmi, Singleton highlights that Panikkar's theatre is not simply a critique of interculturalism. Instead, Singleton argues that it is, quote, a defiant attempt to legitimize its performance heritage by resisting the dominant ideology through ritual practice. Singleton sees ritual as inextricably linked to the regional belief systems, and Panikkar's theatre that uses logic of ritual transformation is thereby seen as disallowing or nullifying the cleft in the mundane effected in by the theatricality. Singleton argues, quote, the vital act of transformation in modern theatre is an allegory of the regional and religious value system. The religious belief represented through theatrical allegory not only resists urbanizing and westernizing rationality, but also any meta-theatrical self-consciousness on the part of the spectator. Resistance, therefore, becomes theatrical as well as social, religious, and non-rational. With the category of transformation, Singleton folds theatricality of performances to ritual and religion, ironically in negation of the former. Theatre seems to have shed its specific theatricality to become the allegorical real ritual itself, with spectators becoming the participants of the same. The theatre scholar and director Erin B. Mee, on the other hand, in her very important book, Theatre of the Roots, while still highlighting the category of transformation in Panikkar's aesthetics, takes the opposing perspective on theatricality by highlighting the categories of self and individuated spectator aware of meta-theatricality. Analyzing theatre of the roots in India as based on hybridity, Mee argues that Panikkar does not reject proscenium stage completely, and thereby undertakes a deliberate failure to completely decolonize his theatre, and has created a new hybrid modern theatre on his own terms, rooted in performing arts and culture of Kerala. Basing her analysis on her observation and anecdotal information on the directorial intervention and actors' processes in the rehearsal, derived from her interaction with Panikkar, Mee foregrounds it as a critical response to text-dominated theatre, as they foreground a new experience that recognize, and I quote, the value of other or non-text-based, non-linear ways of perceiving, structuring, and processing experience. Mee primarily analyzes Panikkar's aesthetic through Sanskritic categories such as Dhvani, Rasa, concept of Sahridayan, which is the ideal spectator, using Abhinav Gupta's theorization, and the quality of imagination associated with Sahridayan, and the role of theatre itself to allow for such activation of imagination. Mee explores how certain techniques of Kudiyatam, such as Pagarnatam, wherein a character plays other characters, shifting from one to another without much change of costume or props, as well as Swarikal, a technique of vocalization in Chakyar Kooth, and the movements and training derived from the martial arts Kalaripayattu offer the possibility of elaboration and improvisation in theatre. For me, the transformation of these movements into theatre even offers a cleft that allows one to possibly read a sensory critique. For instance, discussing the war sequences in Urubhangam, wherein the actors use movements from Kalaripayattu to kind of perform the war, Mee highlights the quote-unquote distancing effect of war, as she says that when Kalaripayattu is turned into a beautiful slow-motion dance, spectators see how much the soldiers actually enjoy the battle in spite of its obvious costs, and the way they get caught up in the beauty of martial art movement that was originally intended to inflict pain. Though she uses the term distanciation, and this is like make clear that it's very radically different from the other usage by, say, Bertolt Brecht, who also concentrates on distanciation, but in his famous anecdotal one, so if he is probably showing a war sequence, he would actually also do distanciation, but probably the soldiers would be pale and tired, and therefore he will say if they are pale and tired in war, that's not necessarily enjoying the war, but pale and tired, therefore let's put white paint on their faces. So that's kind of distanciation which, say, Brecht would use. Her reading of distanciation is in fact, in fact seem closer to stylization, and is at the heart of her argument of transformation effected by performance. And I'll expand on this problem of stylization rather than distanciation. It becomes clear when Mee analyzes the play Ottayan, a lone tusker, that takes Natyadarmi, or a stylized acting and transformation, itself as its main theme. Now, the play explores the transformation of a Kudiyatam actor who apparently, because his wife is playing the Talam and she makes an error in the Talam and he gets angry and he runs away from the Kootambalam, the space of Kudiyatam, which is Kootambalam, runs into a forest, sees a herd of elephants and a lone tusker there, which is trying, so he gets scared and he has to somehow survive the lone tusker, and therefore he actually starts acting like an elephant. So he embodies an elephant, and the lone tusker goes away. Then woodsmen or savages kind of come up, they capture him, take him away, and then he starts performing another thing that he says that I'm going to build a house for you. And he starts building the house, they start believing in it. So it's almost like Natyadharmi acting itself, allowing him to survive through these instances. Now, as different from ritualistic framing of transformation, Erin B. Mee highlights the possibilities of actors' transformation as the basis of defining self. Mee argues that in Ottayan, the self is defined, quote, in terms of behavior. That makes it radically anti-essentialist. For Ottayan, forces spectators to practice seeing people, not by who they are, but what they can become, thereby foregrounding the question of self as, quote, the act of embracing behavior and the potential for transformation. While Me does foreground the ways in which Panikkar encourages participation as a category, especially for spectator, Me assumes, on the other hand, that theatricality is unrelated to cultural conditioning. What is at the heart of her critique is at once a celebration of sovereignty of the actor and his stylized Natyadharmi transformation, and which is transferred as a value to the master director, allowing it as the basis of a definition of self by the spectator. Theatricality as supposedly transcendental model of life, without interrogating the specificity of theatricality at play in Ottayan and its implication in power and conditioning of the spectators. On the other hand, by taking the aesthetic as fully formed, Me does not address theatricality as an object and discourse historically in the region. The problematic of spectatorship Me sets up is simply based on an assumptions as the complexity of a practice that is precisely felt as new in the region is left uninterrogated. Panikkara's works, especially his early Malayalam productions, in fact offer a fascinating ground to understand the discourse of theatricality in the region, both setting up the Sanskritic categories that Me invokes, as well as issues it raises in a form, which is Panikkara's production, that is seen as new and emerging. And I kind of stop here in terms of the framing of post-colonial resistance by the scholarship, which takes nationalism as the base, to kind of look at a set of theater discussions, which I would argue setting up a certain kind of discourse and gives you very interesting different view of spectatorship itself. Now, and specifically, so these are set of discussions that have happened in the early, I think even all the 4 plays, the early Malayalam productions of Panikkar, which involves all, so I'm specifically looking at, just for this paper, the discussion after the Ottayan, involving all male 9 participants, including poets, playwrights, critics, actors, and a discussion that brings forward complex issues and critiques of the production. In the discussion of Panikkar's earlier plays, one of the issues that is dealt with in detail is the problem of categorization of his performance, whether it is theater or in fact is it another kind of performance. C.N. Srikanthan Nair, the significant playwright who coined the term Thanathu Nadakavedi in his or authentic native theater, in his famous CJ Memorial speech in 1968, foregrounds the impact of Panikkar's performances. Arguing that the term Thanathu, he refers to how our theater should be authentic. He says that after writing the play Kali, his thoughts crystallized to make the call for Thanathu Nadakavedi. Yet with his vision, while he, quote, only thought, spoke of and tried to write plays, he says, K.N. Panikkar showed it in performance presentation. And that the most striking or special aspect of his presentation is that they have the potential to generate a new theatrical form. Nair further argues that one cannot say that it has reached a new theatrical form, and this is Panikkar's production, and that he sees possibility of Panikkar's production to either remain as theater or become something that one cannot categorize as theater once it is formed. What the discussants are grasped, in the case of Ottayan specifically, is the movement of Panikkar's plays fully into Natyadharmi, eschewing Lokadharmi completely, and how it affects the quality of experience for the spectator. So in the earlier plays, while there were some Lokadharmi, actually some of them very strongly Lokadharmi based, and even though Ottayan starts by this actor saying, I'm going to do only Lokadharmi because it is my story, it actually is completely Natyadharmi based. Kainikar Kumarapilla makes his critique blunt, as he feels Ottayan did not move him emotionally at all, as there are no emotions from actual life and did not have a fragment of a fleeting emotion of karuna or sorrow. The discussants foreground that it is not a demand for realism and naturalism, as Karuna Rasa is in fact evoked by forms that are Natyadharmi based, such as Kathakali. Ayyappa Panikkar summarizes the central problem of the peculiarity of the form and differing responses of the general audience. He says, quote, first, one group criticizes that elements such as dance has not been used properly as they are in forms such as Kathakali. Another group criticizes that this is not theater and one cannot see real life in it, unquote. But the issue at hand seems to be the complex cultural condition to theatricality for both actors and spectators and the contemporaneity of performances such as Ottayan. Appakutta Nair says that he did not enjoy it and that it might be because that for him the actors were trying to imitate the acting and spherical patterns of Chakyar from Ottantullal, who is in fact acting in Natyadharmi. So it's not Natyadharmi acting, but it's actually imitation of a Natyadharmi process. Since the actors were not trained in either Kathakali or Kudiyattam or Ottantullal, he says, Payan Panikkar offers an explanation, and they say that they simply, quote unquote, developed the spherical technique of Chakya to embellish emotion. The use of it here was to make the emotion stronger. This might come across as imitation for people who watch Kudiyattam in a disciplined manner. Now, critically, in all of these discussions, they do not take for granted the question of transformation in a ritualistic manner. Narendra Prasad, like P.K. Balakrishnan, whom I come later, highlights the issue of familiarity or the conditioning to understand theatricality in plays such as Ottayan, as they both argue that one need to have watched the earlier performances of Panikkar and connect them to understand something like Ottayan. Prasad foregrounds his perception of critical distancing in Panikkar's earlier plays in relation to rituals, a distancing effect distinct from Mee's folding of distancing to stylization, pointing out that for him, Devatar offered a very, and I quote, a serious and radically different theatre experience. He says that, and I quote slightly at length, the objective of stylization in Devatar was simultaneously plot-related as well as imaginative. The evidence for it is that the performance could generate in us an intense tragic consciousness, even in situations that are humorous. For example, even in a context when mass transformed into devotees and moves in a procession with humor and funny slogans, in its totality, it offers a cynical, tragic sense. It touches the heart. The effect of the totality of the work ripples at all points. By creating irony in one context, the work could touch the spectator in its totality, unquote. The last part of the discussion on Ottayan takes head-on the central aspect of the play, the notion of theatrical transformation itself as linked to acting style. Prasad raises what he feels as a critical issue in stylization of Chakyar or quote-unquote woodsmen or savages. Since this theatre is not Kudiyattam and deals with a theme that is not traditionally dealt with in Kudiyattam and isn't in fact performed before a modern public, Prasad points out how the performance is unable to provide the stylization of village or folk arts for the savages, as they also seem to be caught in the overall classical stylization. Prasad raises the critical issue how the distinction between classical and folk is not a binary, but is a matter of particular disciplining of the body or chitta, and is in fact how the quote-unquote Chakyar, if the Chakyar loosens his discipline, it merges more with the villageness of the savages. Ayyappa Panikkar succinctly ends the discussion, making a peculiar paradox about the play. He argues that the play raises certain curious questions about theatrical representation itself, and it is a rare play that takes theatre acting itself as its central theme. He argues that therefore, and I quote, it is not the Chakyar who is the character here in the play, instead it is acting itself, that is the character, and that one might not expect the playwright to write another play such as Ottayan. He concludes the discussion by saying that while the playwright might have kept in mind acting strategies of earlier plays, quote, the theme of the play is very limited. In a sense, the play is a rehearsal. More than representing an incident, it attempts to explore how an acting system can be made successful. In that sense, I think we can say that this is an experiment. One cannot see the other plays of this playwright in a similar manner. That in itself is the uniqueness of the play, and that's a peculiar paradox that Ayyappa Panikkar highlights. Now, the indication of the failures of the performance in the discussion needs to be seen in relation to that of Mee's interpretation, wherein we mean attempts to fix the performance in the mainstream normative discourse of Sanskritic imagination by not problematizing the reception of performances in the region, even by such a sympathetic audience, which is all-male audience who was extremely close friends with the director. It is especially significant as Ottayan, which is discussed for its failure of capturing the contemporary by the discussant, is in fact a critical performance in Panikkar's foray into the national. As Panikkar himself records, after watching a performance of Ottayan in Thiruvananthapuram, a friend of his, Ashok Vajpayee, the then Cultural Secretary of Madhya Pradesh, asked him whether he could make a Kalidasa performance in Sanskrit in this style. Since at the time he was already thinking about translating Madhyama Vyayoga by Bhasa, he volunteered to direct it. What was critical in the discussions is not that the play diverged from naturalism or realism. Instead, even within the stylization, what was being highlighted was that something is missing at the level of senses and affect that moves one in the contemporary. It is not simply that Mee's nationalist position misses to acknowledge the discourse and simply reiterates the Sanskritic categories. The category that me institutes have been in fact discussed in detail in the region and are set as discourses of theatricality. Yet they do not institute a simple binary of text and performance or stylization and realism like the nationalist discourse does. Instead, without extending theatricality and actors' sovereignty as a model for life, they also in crucial ways are not collapsible to the national as they categorically foreground issues confronting the contemporary. In this sense, it is only by eliding regional and the vernacular that a national self can be instituted. Now I turn from this sort of theatrical discussion, the last part I turned to an essay and kind of a theorization, which I think is quite interesting and kind of opens out something else. Once you kind of have this sort of critique of post-colonial resistance or a certain kind of framing, that allows us to relook at certain problems of Kannada Nataka Vedi or Theatre of the Roots, to kind of also problematize other ways in which we give theatre genealogies, kind of historicize and periodize certain kind of movements. And here I look at specifically the question of sonic theatricality and counter-sovereignty by the work by P.K. Balakrishnan, who analyzes a fascinating essay where he looks at the trilogy of Ramayana plays, Kanjana Sita, which was written in 1958, Saketam in 1965, and Langa Lakshmi in 1976. And you can, as you can see, the dates 58, 65, and 76, they are quite, there is a tremendous gap between the plays. Srikandan Nair, as mentioned earlier, is one of the significant playwrights who is in fact coined the term Kannada Nataka Vedi. The three Ramayana plays, especially the first, Kanjana Sita, has been extremely popular on stage as well as radio plays and performed in Thiruvananthapuram and inspired eponymous even film of the same name in 1977, following a common strategy in the vernacular critical writings. P.K. Balakrishnan merges the biographical and anecdotal to accentuate critical analysis of the writer's oeuvre and its context. The article starts with a humorous setting up of the personality of Nair, his supposed comportment of a king who seems to have mistakenly born 2 centuries later. Now, this peculiar comportment of a king who suddenly 2 centuries later, unfortunately born, is then concretized to the particularity of the personality of Srikandan Nair by recollecting the first instance of meeting Nair. While Balakrishnan was working as a journalist, Nair once walked into the office asking, he was supposed to ask, is Chummar here or Chummar ivide undo? Instead, Balakrishnan say, Srikandan Nair asked, Chummar ivide undo. Now, he says with a peculiar kind of stress, Chummar ivide undo in place of Chummar ivide undo. Balakrishnan says that he might have slightly exaggerated the stress that Srikandan Nair might have actually used. Yet, he is sure that Nair would never have asked in a manner that a normal person would ask. With this anecdote, Balakrishnan captures the theatricality of language, wherein a breach in the mundane occurs as language is brought to fore for its sound. Such a gaze of alterity, at the first instance, records Balakrishnan's dislike and critique of Srikandan Nair's pompous feudal posturing, wherein the heightened stress of accent undertakes a Sanskritizing of everyday Malayalam language that seems to exist seemingly without any contradiction in the upper caste body of Nair. Balakrishnan does indicate this with reference to the kingly comportment that I referred earlier, yet perceived by Balakrishnan through the lens of theatricality and not simply as identity. For Balakrishnan, it also becomes a fundamental frame to understand a personality or a self of Nair. Nair for Balakrishnan is what he terms, quote unquote, a sonic creature. Balakrishnan elaborates the phrase, highlighting the relationship between language, sound, and meaning. Balakrishnan says, and I quote at length, it was impossible for Srikandan to take in sounds of a language at the ordinary or general level as nomenclatures denoting each and every object. This ability or inability was equally physiological as it was psychological. Srikandan's was a self that connects nomenclature, sound, and the object in an undivided manner. Shakespeare is lucky that the Shakespearean saying, what is there in a name, did not come to the attention of Srikandan in his early in his life, for he would have changed it to everything is in a name. The objects, ideas, sensation, all these can be taken in by Srikantan's consciousness and self only through a special order or arrangement of sound, unquote. After setting up the basic premise of special relationship to sound, Balakrishnan analyzes Nayar's play in relation to amateur theatre in Thiruvananthapuram. Balakrishnan highlights that the Thiruvananthapuram Amateur Theatre Forum, having a long 75-year-old tradition, was based on two separate strands of Prahasanam, or social satire, and historical plays. That are the two strands. For him, meaning for Srikantan Nayar, these strands, as well as overall sensibility and, quote, his own innate interest in exaggerated sound, possibly generated in Nayar the desire to write Kanjana Sita. Balakrishnan further argues that what might have given the concrete form to this desire was a Thiruvananthapuram amateur theatre that surrounded him and the constant and assured audience that it drew. The description of the amateur theatre practice itself and the value Balakrishnan ascribes to it seems to be guided by an anti-theatrical impulse. An amateur theatre in which, and I quote Balakrishnan, the important actors use a style of declamation, uses selective strategies to create stage effects for them. The Kanjana Sita is a play that has been written keeping in mind their decided or assured oratory declamation and movements that generate assured celebratory response from the audience. In my understanding, once the style of speaking dialogues, action segments, etc. have seeped in his mind, similar to the 6 characters in search of an author, Srikantan Nayar, in his search for the ideal play, arrived at the story of Sita's abandonment, unquote. After setting up where Nayar might have drawn the primary sources for his play, and in certain novels, interpretations, other than, like Mama Varekar's, etc., other than Valmiki's version, Balakrishnan concludes that after watching the production umpteen times, even with a strong desire to even identify with some kind of artistic value in it, he comes to the conclusion that one cannot ascribe any more artistic value to it that one ascribes to the commercial theatre of the times. What is this anti-theatricalism of Balakrishnan? When one takes into account that his reckoning that Langa Lakshmi as a classical tragedy had occurred to him while listening to the play being read out by Nayar, one wonders whether such a position is a simple negation of theatrical practices of the time by categorizing them as commercial. In his study Stage Fright, Martin Puchner argues that one need to move away from the tendency of seeing celebration of theatricality by the avant-garde and anti-theatrical impulse by modernism as a binary. Puchner argues that, in fact, one has to understand the constitutive anti-theatral dynamic within modernism as a form of resistance. Anti-theatricalism for Puchner is a process that is dependent on that which it negates, and to which, therefore, it remains calibrated. The resistance registered in the prefix anti thus does not describe a place outside the horizon of theatre, but a variety of attitudes through which theatre is being kept at arm's length and in the process of resistance utterly transformed. One could see this actually in the writings of Balakrishnan on even CJ and other kind of writings. One could see that there seems to be this sort of an anti-theatrical modernist impulse, which is sort of as a larger problematic in his writings. But specifically in the context here of the Ramayana plays on Nayar, Balakrishnan Nayar's modernist resistance invokes anti-theatricality in two interlinked senses that open up relationship between theatricality, soundscape, and sovereignty. On one, as linked to both formulas of sovereignty and as well as theatricality as generating a poetic, non-general world or extraordinary world. What the critique of sonic theatricality, and I'll explain these two aspects. What the critique of sonic theatricality of Thiruvananthapuram amateur theatre in relation to Kanjana Sita foregrounds is the formulaic sovereignty, wherein the audience is stunned into subjection or celebration in the experience of sovereignty. The relation between characters in drama play who use only codified comportments, gestures, and styles of declamation to the audience and to the performance are formal, ritualized, with theatricality simply restaging and reproducing the performative world of sovereignty in its full glory or power, as they experience it in heavy-sounding Sanskrit Malayalam words in the present. And Balakrishnan kind of very aptly says fireworks. What you hear is the sounds are just fireworks. Against the celebration of formulaic sovereignty, this is analysis of Saketam and Langa Lakshmi. Balakrishnan highlights that Nayar has relocated and gets disconnected from Thiruvananthapuram Amateur Theatre Forum and starts engaging deeply with Valmiki Ramayana. And the gap of 16 years to mark the play marks a transformation of formulaic sonic theatricality and the arrival of a different tone. He argues that Nayar's later Ramayana plays, in them, one evidences how, and I quote, rather than as a device to communicate necessary words to describe necessary facts and ideas, language has transformed into an investigator, discerning objects that yield to proper or suitable nomenclature sounds. For Srikanthan, sound was the central emphasis or thrust of his aesthetic, as well as the self-manifestation or value originating in itself. I consider that this impediment of talent or gift was also his special talent. Unquote. In fact, in Nayar, Balakrishnan considered that the skill of sound offers accomplishment of total illumination and has risen and risen to a grand tone. Balakrishnan highlights the difficulty of adapting epics, adapting epics present, as one cannot simply differentiate character using normal dialects and variation, nor make a complete move away from the normal language. Therefore, it requires an artificial language and its mannerism, or extraordinary language. Balakrishnan argues, unnatural story fragment, unnatural characters, unnatural language. The writer has the difficult work of generating a feeling of reality and authenticity of movement of action, while holding on to these and within that construct moving non-human characters as believably self-complete individuals who could be distinguished from each other. Critically, what Balakrishnan in the process investigates is what might be the appropriate register of a public address and how varying public address as performative iteration constitutes differing political subjects. Highlighting the words such as ni or you, Karnavare, Lord, Unni, son in Langa Lakshmi, in place of feudal terms such as Adiyan or slave and Rajan as king addressed from a lower status, between various characters in Ravana, Balakrishnan in a lucid manner shows the distinction between language and its sonic effect in the three plays. Resisting the formal protocols of address, the world of sovereignty has suddenly become intimate. The address is not ceremoniously or formulaically royal, but it is in fact more majestic. Balakrishnan argues that it is not the absence of sound that distinguishes them. Instead, the sounds have loosened. He says, Langa Lakshmi is also an art of sound. It is a literary and theatrical art wherein emotions and meanings are attracted to sound, and where, quote, many a times unrelenting, implacable ill-temperedness of even meaningless sound have transformed into unceasing, reverberating, serious or grand emotion. Balakrishnan contextualizes this aesthetics of language as Langa Lakshmi is not happening in ordinary level of believability of life. It happens at truly believable, extraordinary level of the extraordinary. While the essay of Balakrishnan starts with a funny anecdote about Nayar, it ends with one linking relationship between Nayar and his mother, with whom he was living at the time of writing of the play, and who was diagnosed with cancer and passed away before the play was finished. Describing her as one possessing, quote, silent, creative, forbearing, humanitarian intellect, Balakrishnan places the gendered performative intimacy between the mother and son in relation to the sequences of Kaishigi, which is Ravana's mother, and Mandodari, Ravana's wife, and latter's description of mother's wishes to Ravana. This movement from seeming pompous Nayar to a personal tragedy to the citation of an intimate relationship is a move that Balakrishnan undertakes to reveal how the play recasts the light on contemporary by transforming Ravana into a classic tragic figure, and thereby the world of sovereignty being a world of contestation and failure, a world of counter-sovereignty. Reflecting in details on the qualities of tragic, Balakrishnan shows that Ravana's fall as not simply a fall of an individual, but emblematic of fall of Rakshasas, in all its grandeur and sorrow, as distinct from the binary characterization of Ravana as a villain or a hero. Balakrishnan ends by saying that while characters of this epic could have been dead characters, the reason the main characters are able to be dynamic, offer tragic sensibility, is the personal in Nayar, his gift or limit that recasts the world through sonic theatricality. Ravana's tragic question of himself, was my life a futile endeavor? is a condition of exposure as opposed to celebration of sovereignty that crystallizes both the tragedy of Rakshasa clan in the epic as well as the tragedy of a consciousness inextricably tied to theatricality. Distinct from nationalist definitions of India as time immemorially absenting the tragic, Balakrishnan therefore ends by asserting that Langa Lakshmi holds a place in Malayalam cultural world precisely because it is an ideal Greek tragedy that could capture the tone of tragic in the contemporary. And I kind of end the analysis here and kind of conclude with just to highlight 2 or 3 points that what I've done here and kind of where it sort of could be taken forward in a certain sense. So one of the things that nationalist framing has always done is to make the binary of text and performance, which we can see in a lot of these analysis on Theatre of the Roots or Kannada Nagavedi, as well as certain sense of Greek versus or tragic versus India as a land without tragedy, tragic, etc. Now, what I've also done is by historicizing theatricality as an object and discourse in the period from 1960s and 80s, I try to explore the significance of practices as experimentation and how sometimes it is in the marking of the failures that the potentiality of the new is felt. The discussion of theatricality in the form of tone in Balakrishnan offers something distinct from the earlier nationalist position. Far from a transcendental understanding of theatricality, Balakrishnan thinks through theatricality as a cleft in the mundane. Definitely, there is a cleft in the mundane. But wherein theatricality opens out counter-sovereignty at the level of everyday, one could say performativity of public address, the personal, as well as the artistic or poetic theatrical world of the extraordinary or exceptional. It is precisely the socio-political that is opened out as a tone, as here, without assuming an authentic community or already formed community before the performance. The Balakrishnan highlights a theatrical community, a community constituted through the soundscape that can register the newness troubling the existing worlds of the sovereignty and power. So I kind of, and this is my larger question that, in terms of particularly historicizing, and this is a limited work in terms of just opening out certain kind of questions of theatricality, when we look at the period and movement, that certain kinds, and I end there, that an approach towards theatricality would also allow us to see a certain kind of foldings or assumptions which is done in relation to when theatre is seen as ritual, theatre is seen as allowing certain kind of meta-theatricality or just sort of folded onto Sanskritic categories of, like we say, dhwani, rasa, etc. Without actually the complexity of what it generates. And very critically, certain things like when we look at problematics of, say, sonic theatricality, that it becomes quite important to also look, say, horizontally in that historical period, whether it be questions of, whether it be amateur theatre forum, radio plays, or certain that what is being negated or where the new is felt might not be necessarily a simple genealogy of exclusive theatre that is defined as theatre, where it moves to certain practices are existing, then there is Theatre of the Root, then certain kind of new visuality, new contemporary aesthetic is being arrived at. One could see that when we look at these movements back to moments and creating genealogies, one should also possibly look at these other, even one could even call minor possibilities and potentialities which might be important. Okay, thank you so much. So I stop there.
Sir, could you unmute the mic, Professor Michael? I think the chairperson's connection has we'll wait for a minute. Meanwhile, anybody who has queries may please type in the queries here in the chat box. It will be read out.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I would. First of all, I wish to thank Parameshwaran, Dr. Parameshwaran, for a very good presentation, very excellent and clear presentation. Now, I think we can open it up for discussion. Rachel, will you control or guide the question answer session? I mean, like.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Please do.
Yes. We have a query from Supraja Ramesh. Amit, am I audible? Could Professor Amit please elaborate more on sonic theatricality? Could Professor Amit please elaborate more on sonic theatricality and what that implies to anti-theatrical conceptualizations?
Okay. Thank you for the question. What I mean by sonic theatricality, in a certain sense, in a very simple way in which Balakrishnan, when he says that, he's seeing Srikandan Nair and saying, kind of putting extra stresses on his, that humorous anecdote. One could say very simply that it's a matter of theatricality. What do you do? Like even going back to Joseph Farrell's perspective, one could simply say you're viewing the world as through the lens of theatricality. Now, somebody might be there, say, if we assume that it's Prakash Nair who actually speaks like that, but we are putting a gaze there, it kind of that over stress. And that's what a lot of comic work in Kerala, definitely playing with language, it actually does, is to kind of show something in everyday, but it's something extra, something viewed as lens through it, which kind of automatically allows a critique to happen. But what Balakrishnan is doing with that, and then to kind of really elaborate and make it into this larger problem of sonic theatricality, the ways that the social, it kind of opens out, is something I think very important. And the reason why I also try to highlight it, because one of the central troubles, methodological issues when we face with certain kind of framings of quote-unquote Indian theatre, is this distinction between text and performance. That is there in Western theatre also, or in a certain sense, it's part of, it's actually constructed as part of self, like Erika Fischer-Lickteig, they would say that West itself constructs itself as text-based. So there was a lot of work in 20th century by theatre practitioners and scholars, etc., to break that and to say that performance is also part of Western modernity, etc., or Western self. Now, in Indian context, it's actually very, it's almost kind of assumed that that we have to move to performance is what is important. So text is not that is important, but in this play of binary, what might also be missed, and certain sense, and in recent times, stress on visuality, what might be also missed is the importance of the sonic. Importance of sonic in terms of the language, not as simply as text or not simply as written language. What it does to us in the question of the social through sounds, and that itself is something that theatre has played around with. That some of these efforts of stylization, Natyadharmi, is also kind of very, very easily avoiding the socio-political by actually avoiding the question of the sonic in peculiar ways in which it opens out socio-political. And that's what I wanted to kind of try, that in a world of the Rakshasa world, a world which is majestic, but which does not follow the formulaic royalty, formulaic sovereign model of the world, is something that he's highlighting in Lanka Lakshmi as very critical. So I thought that's where I would say, but the sonic theatricality, but the problem of theatricality, but work through sound at the register of the sound itself. And therefore, that's the first part of it. An anti-theatrical conception, like I said, one could see that the modernist, certain kind of modernism has a certain kind of anti-theatrical impulse. But it's not as simple as saying, oh, all theatre is bad, or theatre is commercial, popular, that the text is sort of really what the truth, or kind of really the elevation is happening in the text, and the kind of moment it comes to the stage, it's actually going down. I'm saying that that is also not the way one could understand some of these critiques, that it's not that theatrical Tirunelveli Amateur Forum is kind of limited or it's failure, but there you find an ideal text. But what is being argued through is not text and theatre forum as practice, but something about one needs to see across them of something called what one could call as sonic theatricality. So those were my I hope it's clearer.
The next query is from Jayaji Nair. She asks, what do you think about the position of Kannada Nadavedi at present times?
Okay, I'm not sure I understand the question fully. Position of Kannada Nadavedi, I don't know, are they practitioners or the way they are doing? One can see that there is, at least in the scholarship, a lot of people try to even put contemporary practitioners, certain contemporary practitioners are also as Kannada Nadavedi or under the frame of theatre of the roots, etc. There seems to be also, we can see the changes with a certain kind of Hindutvaization. There is a peculiar kind of Hindutva in power, also demands certain kind of going back to supposedly roots, even though I must say that there's a great difference between, I would say, I would maintain that 70s and 80s Kannada Nadavedi or theatre of the roots and what are the practices that are being hailed now, even when it is done by the same people into the center, because they don't seem to have at all have something of, even there's some of interesting questions that at least Kannada Nadavedi asked at that point. So now it's simply at the level of certain kind of symbolism, probably nothing to do with good theatrical practice at all. So there is that kind of, that nationalism, even the way that nationalism is channeling some of going back to past is also very radically different, I would feel, from the impetus of 70s, 80s to what is contemporary. So I think that would be my kind of initial response. I think but there is also a lot of other very interesting contemporary practices which has seemingly moved away, or emergent practices which might take Kannada Nadavedi or theatre of the roots as the backdrop to reject, etc., which is where a genealogy, where a history of theatre becomes very interesting, and the place of Kannada Nadavedi has to be relooked.
Before I go to the next question, Jayaji Nair has clarified her question. She names, would you position it as a successful experiment or not?
Okay. I don't know what to respond to that. That's not a frame in which I argue, because even actually I said that failures are more interesting. So that's not the way I look at it. A successful experiment, you can see there was a lot of funding. There's a lot of other kind of state power used in certain ways, channeled the movement in certain ways, etc. One gather can call that successful. I don't think that's the frame in which I might be looking at it.
Sujit Kumar Parel has a question. How do you distinguish the text in ritual performances and textual theatre performances?
Okay. Okay, text in ritual performances and textual theatre performances. I guess in both, for at least the position that I'm taking here, at least both. No, it's not to denigrate, like, textuality analysis of that is quite important. But I think what I've tried to do with the idea of sonic theatricality in this paper is to follow a larger conception of, I guess, which has come out from, particularly from performance studies, looking at African performances, etc., on the question of orature, where that you don't make a distinction between necessarily about text and performance, but orature, that even texts are sometimes written with orality as a base. So a lot of work on orature is kind of interesting and important. So in my earlier work also, whenever I'm looking at poetry, it is recitals, not because it's just performed, but even that the ways in which that poetry is, quote unquote, written is with a certain sense of orature. So that's where I have, I'm interested in looking at the problem of text through sound, etc. So I would say even in ritual performances, text and ritual performance in certain cases has that particular sonic charge to it. Definitely a lot of it is orature based, whether it is in Theyyam, Totem has to be sung in a particular way. So it's not necessarily, as we would traditionally understand, the problem of text is not necessarily the problem of text there. And here I'm also making theatricality because it does make that there is a cleft, that therefore it's not necessarily ritual, that there is something else there. There is a cleft. which allows you to then start a fictional world, I suppose. So that part is there. And yet, how does that fiction then kind of start troubling our everyday ways of our listening, ways of our being in sound, is what I kind of tried to look at. So it's not to denigrate. I definitely would, very important ways one would look at it. But like even Balakrishnan, I think actually it's very interesting that he says at some point that he's not going to analyze the sounds here. And that's very interesting ways he's structured that essay also, that he quotes from Pantanus, a similar kind of situation, and he quotes another long line from that. You say you feel it. That's what he said. I'm not going to analyze why is it so, but you feel it. And when moment you read it, you know, in a sense, you feel the difference. And that's what he's trying to make as this new emergence of sonic, because you have to imagine that sounds, you speak it loud. So I think that's, I've not answered the question, but those is my tentative ways to approach it.
Givergis AM has a comment and a question. Formidable presentation. Let me follow this up with a question that may be somewhat stupid. Declamation and that kind of sonic theatricality must have been an imperative in the pre-microphone loudspeaker days. To what extent would a certain kind of sonic theatricality be a residual impact from those days?
No, this is a fascinating question, and we all know, like particularly work in, I guess, music studies have really shown us what microphone does, or what recording, gramophone, a lot of these other rise of technology does to the ways of actually aesthetic practice, etc. So I'm also pretty sure that there is something interesting going on here. But at least what I would say is that already maybe the time period we are looking at is where, and that's why I have not gone to there. That's something that one needs to do. And the reason why I kind of raised the question of radio plays and the way the sound is felt, the way particularly radio plays construct a certain kind of relationship to sound, is something extremely crucial. So it might not be necessary, not just microphone, but also other kind of listening practices are extremely critical. And that technology, that's why I said, one cannot just simply possibly look at theater as an exclusive space like we do often in history, in writing histories, but maybe that these sort of technology questions become quite important. Microphone and microphone presents very interesting problem. Not just as a technical choice, but also as, I guess, particularly in Kerala, as a problem of public expression. That, whether it is the crowds in the fields, or all of, whether it's law and theater plays a crucial part in that, allowing a certain kind of public expression to happen. And microphone has a very interesting, and loudspeaker has an interesting context there. So I wouldn't be able to, at this point, I wouldn't be able to elaborate more on the specificity of this pattern, because also I'm also not looked at. What one needs to look at is later, because one of the problems with and the reason one is going back to Srikandan Nair is also that even Srikandan Nair himself saying that I couldn't do it. I could only think of Kannada Nadagavedi, but he showed us. Panikkar showed us in presentation and performance. But the issue is that, so are these simply wordy plays of Srikandan Nair? They are seen as very wordy plays. And maybe sometimes I would say that the whole problem of the sonic has to be reduced and kind of substituted by visuality, which would be going back to tradition, which could be Teyyam, which could all kinds of things. But visuality kind of takes over the sound and the problem of the words itself. That, I think, is something that one should be careful about. And when we look at adaptations and different ways, that should be something that one would be exciting to look at. How this problem, is it a total evading of the issues that the sonic theatricality is bringing up to some completely new contemporary? That is a problem that I've not worked at, but something that that's why it's a working paper, and I need to kind of look at other aspects. But thank you so much for the question.
Jobin Thomas has a question. Thanks, Amit, for the insightful talk. My query might be a bit off topic. Could you elaborate a little about transactions between the Brechtian political theatre and its tools, and Thanadu Nadagavedi. Do you think the emphasis on class politics in Brecht retreats towards a politics of cultural nationalism in Kavali?
Okay. I'm not sure how to respond. In a sense, because I don't think there are too many transactions between Brechtian political theatre and theatre of the roots. I don't think they are, even though some of the nationalist framings would kind of try to analyze not theatre of the roots, but would say Bertolt Brecht and Indian tradition. We have seen a lot of books like that. To kind of even say the V effect is alienation effect or distanciation effect is actually already there in the Indian tradition, traditional forms, etc. A lot of that kind of works have been already existing. But I'm not sure on rather than this sort of really framework, and therefore another kind of continue some of it because it is simply non-realistic. Because I don't think any of them, any of those practitioners were quite interested or kind of engaged with Brecht, or kind of even definitely the politics part of it very clearly. That I'm not so sure. I don't think I can think of many working there. As in terms of a comparison between Brecht and Thanadu Nadagavedi. So, and for class politics, I don't know. So, for that question is slightly difficult for me to kind of approach because that basis is not there as far as I'm concerned. Even though there are very interesting, because Thanadu, or in that period, kind of, there could be very interesting ways to look at, say, not Brecht, but say, what I would say in space of Kerala, Janagya Samskaryavedi, some of the things that are happening in the left, but not Brechtian, but the aesthetic of the time period has certain kind of sharing, which is certain kind of turn to ritual, kind of really using certain things. But my argument would be they're not the same. And that's why it's even more imperative to look at this sort of turn towards tradition and kind of differentiate what is going on with, say, a Nadagadiga, which is turning to a ritual, to a Panikar who's turning to Teyyam. So those are, I think, important ways to kind of look at it. Yeah.
Those are the queries that have come. In fact, Professor Michael Karadin's phone had got switched off. He said he'll be back in a minute.
Okay.
So by the time he comes, like our director was saying, the next lecture in the series will be on August 6th by Professor Anupama Roy on history of citizenship in India. This was originally planned as a public lecture, and now it will be a webinar. So we will just wait for one more minute. Hello, sir. So the question answer session is over. Could you unmute your mic? Oh, another last question. Professor Sanal Mohan is asking, is it possible to have a comparison of Nadagadiga and the work of Panikar?
Okay. Yeah, in a sense that actually this project started to kind of work on Nadagadiga and related kind of works, because this is my work earlier, particularly looking at when they turn to the in Nadagadiga, for instance, they turn towards that ritual of Gadiga as a frame, not necessarily part of it. Even though there is that question, and what was fascinating for me was the problem of possession, what you can call political possession in Nadagadiga. And why that aesthetic is, why is it actually very different? This is not Brechtian. There's none of it is what we otherwise think of as left aesthetic. But we see that in similar ways in Kadamanita. So what I've been fascinated was that question. And more interviews or other kind of discussions with the people of the time period, of practitioners of the time period, also kind of, there seems to be certain kind of excitement about actually some of the festivals that have happened that they have watched, certain new training processes and spaces where they are seeing such kind of experimentation. So what I would say, I would not venture into a comparison at this point, but I want to kind of mark that is how I started this work, because I never wanted to kind of work on Thanadu Nadagavedi. I thought, this is not done, or this is something that I can critique. It does not need my serious attention. And yet this is the problem, that there seems to be some kind of a shared field, even though they are using it for very different political impetuses, and I would say that. But that kind of led me more and more that, how do we kind of demarcate them, that field that is being shared, yet very different kind of political elaborations that are happening using a lot of theorem. So I would say that's where the work is on currently. So that's how I kind of arrived at all of this, is actually to look at these other left practices to kind of even at least see what is the sharing and the demarcation. And I wouldn't venture too much at this point, because that left part I've done I've written, I've sort of worked on it. But this sort of relations, I think, need to work, frankly, work more on. All I would kind of just venture to kind of say that there is a problem. The problem, and I think that is something that is there. Maybe it comes from looking at more of the left work, that I think there is a problem of ideology which is at the heart of some of this. Even what you claim as moving towards the people who are practitioners of Tananadagvedi, definitely Panikkar, you will see that there is the question of ideology at the heart of the practice there also. Yet, what they are moving towards, that even when he uses Theyyam, that is the ironic part of that, which is not possibly, I would say, is not accepted or recognized in the national framings. That even when he's, what Narendra Prasad is highlighting is interesting, because he's saying that when he's actually moving towards the Theyyam is a site of irony. Or even in Theyyam, when the lower caste man who sort of done the transgression is murdered while playing Parangi, the Portuguese, and he's killed, so becomes Theyyam. The Theyyam space is actually looked for, in a certain sense, a contradictory space, ironical, etc. That's the way it functions there. But very interestingly, I would venture to say that actually the left practices, or Nadagadika specifically, definitely that is there, that there is another kind of work through that, the problem of possession, or what we think of as ritual problem, but as at the heart of politics itself. And I think there's a lot of other work of PM Taj and others which come later. The problem that what at the heart of why they are moving into it, this ritual, almost oratory, or kind of the moments of orature, moments of getting possessed by language sometimes, by slogan sometimes, by poem sometimes, is actually, they are actually very strangely, the left field is actually turning towards all of them with a more seriousness, but as really tied to politics, and using that as itself political impetus, because they play with affect differently. But actually in the work of Panikkar, etc., you actually see more irony, more, in a certain sense, actually it is not the issue of simply using a Theyyam or just kind of rechanneling the affects of Theyyam is not what they are doing here. But it's slightly differently done in Gaddiga, but I think it's far more implicated in the politics of possession rather than actually theatre of the roots. And that's an ironic, strange position to take, but I think that's where I am at this point.
Professor Michael Tharragan, may I request you to your microphone is on mute, sir.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Dr. Amit, your presentation was extremely good. I could hear all your throughout your presentation, but there was a bit of a problem after that. So I couldn't follow the kind of questions and answers that went on. Therefore, I wouldn't be able to. I'm not in a position to really sum up. I mean, I don't think this kind of seminars requires any summing up. But as a person who has lived through the Thanadu Nadagavedi years, what I found most striking while trying to recall what was as a person who went to see some of their actual performance, was essentially a kind of irony with nostalgia, very much. One thinks mainly about the kind of the signature aesthetic of Sopana, Sangeetam, and of course the use of the you can use like thematic. You can also use the word thematic in the sense that it is essentially a kind of a movement which is closer to an ordinary observer to a Theyyam performance. So I think Kavalam Narayana Panikkar was out to create a kind of a performance which I think would leave more questions behind than answers. That is what, as a plain observer who haven't had any analytical equipment either at that time or even now to analyze this. I'm very happy that you have provided us with certain insights, certain analytical insights into the kind of movement which happened in this region and which has got various kinds of impact in the future also. And I'm sure that it will keep on having such impact. So in that sense, there is a need for historicizing the whole movement and studying it in a larger analytical and also theoretical context. I'm happy that you provided us with a possibility to do that kind of analysis. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, and also thanks to everyone who had helped organize this program. Dr. Rachel Verghese, Dr. Fashia, Hita, who organized the technical facilities, and all the participants for coming and joining us in this occasion. I thank every one of you, in addition to the official thanks that would be provided, I think, by Rachel Verghese. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Amit. That was a very, challenging in certain ways and thought-provoking presentation. Thank you for joining us today, and all of you, everyone in the audience, we thank you very much for your presence. We look forward to meeting you for our next webinar on August 6th. And I thank my colleagues of the KCHR for making this event possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.